Retro now.
Hey, this is Lauren Mary Kim, and I'm the stunt double for Ahsoka Tano in Clone Wars and the armorer in The Mandalorian. You're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. This is the way.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And it's finally Friday. I don't know about y'all, I've had a long week, and I'm looking forward to wrapping it up with some Star Wars news. But before we get into that, Jay, I want to remind everybody where we can be found on social media.
Absolutely. Always great to end the week with Star Wars. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the dish is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, and we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So up first, we are approaching the premiere of Maul Shadow Lord in April, and Sam Witwer is making his rounds, doing interviews, whether it's on podcasts or the final or one of the final episodes of Star Wars Insider, I should say. And so he's been talking a little bit about this, and he's kind of got his he's got his sound bites ready, and he's got, he's kind of polished, because I'm seeing like the same quotes coming from a bunch of different places. But so he's done this interview with Star Wars Insider talking about Maul and this series. And I just found this interesting, so I thought we could talk about it a little bit. He said, in this series, Maul's been trained to hate and destroy the Jedi without ever questioning it. Now he's looking out the galaxy going, boy, we sure could use a Jedi Knight or two. At least with the Jedi, you knew where they stood. There's something to respect there. This empire, he sees no values there, just the naked grab for influence, power, and money. Principles are gone, and he looks at that with a certain level of distaste. He may not have agreed with the Jedi Knights, but at least they had principles. You knew who you were dealing with, and you could reason with that. There's no reasoning with the Empire. And then he goes on to say, this show is very much bad guys versus worse guys, and Maul's on the bad guy side of that equation. So what's your reaction to those quotes from Sam and Star Wars Insider?
Well, first of all, I could listen to Sam Witwer talk about the migration habits of cicadas, and it would still be entertaining. And I don't care if it's in print form or if it's, in a YouTube video or a podcast or whatever. He is so amazing when he talks about Star Wars, and especially when he's talking about characters that he's portraying. And of course, in this case, it's Maul. And, here's the thing. I mean, of course, we know that Maul is never going to wear the white robes and hug Ewoks. I mean, that's not the kind of, principles that he's talking here. But for Maul, I think, this is going to be a really interesting character study, I think, is what this is turning out to be, because his compass is in a tizzy. And it's kind of like Jack Sparrow's, and it's trying to point to what you really want. And he doesn't know what he really wants at this point. And so it's kind of all over the place. And so I think that this is going to really point to, if using that analogy, kind of a recalibration arc for Maul, because we're in that in-between era where we know what happens after and we knew what came before. And so we're looking through this kind of different lens. And so I'm really digging that. And, and again, it's that whole psychological dive into who Maul is and what he's thinking and how his future ends up rolling out. And it's just, I love it. What was your take?
Well, some of this reminded me of some very key episodes of the Clone Wars, and I'm thinking back to the end of a Mandalorian arc that we haven't got to yet in our rewatch, where Sidious shows up on Mandalore and basically attacks Maul and Savage Opress. And at first, Maul is kind of almost jubilant that Sidious has come back. He senses his presence. He goes, "Oh, master!" And you kind of get the impression that he wants to get back into Sidious's good graces, and of course Sidious doesn't allow for that, and you're no longer my apprentice, and it goes
Nice.
badly there. But then later in season 7, when he and Ahsoka are on the, I can't remember which one of the Star Destroyers that they're on, but then Order 66 happens, and everything like falls into place for Maul. He suddenly realizes what the master plan was, and he's like, oh, this is delicious, the way it turned out. But it goes to show that he never really understood Sidious's overall plan and what he was going for there, because he so desperately wanted to be taken back in, and then he so admired that plan. But as Sam Witwer's pointing out here, it's like, oh, careful what you wish for here. This is, I don't necessarily like the Jedi, but boy, that would, it wouldn't be such a bad thing to have them around keeping this empire in check right now.
Oh yeah, for sure. So he's got all of these things he's juggling and trying to figure out where they all end up landing for him.
Mm-hmm. So he was also, Sam Witwer, that is, on the Katee Sackhoff podcast, I think it's called Blah Blah Blah. But he was talking to her, and some of the takeaways were that, again, he knew the Empire was coming, and he was trained to bring it about, and yet he's now confronted with the cold reality of what it actually looks like, which was not what we expect. And he's been drawing a contrast between the clone troopers of the Republic era and the stormtroopers who replaced them, and notes that the clones learned under the Jedi to become their own people. And, by contrast, the stormtroopers have a deliberate sameness. Their individuality has been ironically stripped away. And then later, again, they repeat the point that this isn't going to be a show where you go, oh, you find out Maul is a real teddy bear. They're not doing that type of a show.
Right.
But apparently the thing that really struck me is that he's been pitching ideas like this to Dave Filoni for years.
Yeah.
And every time the response was, this isn't Maul's show. That, those are great ideas, but that makes the show, particularly Rebels, about Maul. And then Sam recalls that it never occurred to him that Maul could have a show. And so that's pretty cool. I've said it before. I'm really happy for Sam Witwer that he's getting this opportunity to lead one of the shows, as opposed to being, it's not a cameo appearance, but not being a secondary character in the overall story.
Oh, absolutely. It's extraordinary. And I am so happy for him as well. And like you, that pointing out that the whole idea of, well, that wasn't Maul's show, that also stood out to me hugely. And I think that also just goes to show, again, kind of the foresight that I think maybe Dave had, that he put in his back pocket. That's at Dave Filoni, of course, because we're on first name basis. But
Right.
but he was like, oh, if we do this further down the road, that okay, we can explore those ideas. But he was keeping true to what the story was at the time. And I think that preserves so much of the character in that now being able to do what they're going to do with him, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. I also like this last bit that Witwer keeps circling back to this one question, which is, I'm the Joker and Batman's dead. What does that feel like?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep. It's true. That's true. And and I've often used that analogy of Sisyphus with rolling the boulder up the mountain only to have it roll back down again. And I can't remember if it was Sam Witwer or if it was Freddie Prinze Jr. that originally I saw this in one of those interviews, but it was one of the two of them. And I've always keyed in on that because I think it's just so brilliant. And just the fact that he's always trying to beat whatever mountain he's on, and the galaxy just keeps resetting the hill, essentially. And now we're gonna hopefully get to see that he's building his own mountain. You know what I'm saying? Like, he might be rolling that boulder, but the mountain is Crimson Dawn in this case.
Indeed. So elsewhere, Katee Sackhoff, who we were just talking about as well, she was at Fan Expo Vancouver and had an opportunity to field some questions about Bo-Katan, to which she responded that Bo-Katan ain't going anywhere. And then, whether she was ready to play that character again, always, she's not dead. She ain't going anywhere. And then the reason she gives for this is that Bo-Katan can't die because she's based off Dave Filoni's wife. So I have job security forever. And Convery would be so and cover any sensitive ears. Pissed. And she said this previously on her podcast, because basically Bo-Katan was derived from Anne Convery and her cat Boogie, and clarified the character's look was based on Anne Convery, not Katee Sackhoff. It just happened to be a nice fit when it came time for casting. So at any rate, she further reflected that the first time she put the armor on in live action, she said, I put my armor on for the first time and Dave Filoni was there and we both cried a little bit. So that was kind of fun. I enjoyed that. I know playing Bo-Katan in live action was tough on Katee, especially at the beginning, but it seems like this is a role she's really come to relish, just like Sam Witwer relishes his work as Maul. And so a lot of the actors seem to kind of enjoy their time in Star Wars these days.
Oh, 100%. And I always loved reading those articles and seeing the interviews with Katee, where she would really get into those stunts that, as much as she could do on her own, and wearing the knee pads and doing the slides and, doing all the things. But yeah, that's a hilarious interview. And I think it's great. I mean, obviously this isn't anything that's Lucasfilm confirmed, but it's her just expressing confidence in the character. But I think I agree. I don't think Bo-Katan's going to go anywhere. She's alive in canon, and she's obviously tied to the core creative team. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing her again. That's for sure. And I know Katee loves the role. I mean, you could tell, like you said, just like Sam Witwer and a lot of these actors just relish it for sure, as you said.
Yeah. Don't think we're going to see Bo-Katan in The Mandalorian and Grogu, but that'd be fun if we did. All right. Well, turning to some comics news. So with the 10th anniversary of Rogue One coming up at the end of the year, Marvel is releasing a series of, this is weird to say, 5 one-shots, a series of one-shots. But anyway, they're doing 5 one-shots that are going to feature a different character on a monthly basis starting in May, and give you just a little bit more backstory about what these characters were up to prior to Rogue One. And some of these are pretty interesting. So I thought we'd take them one by one and share some thoughts. So up first, we've got Cassian Andor coming out on May 6th. This is going to be written by Benjamin Percy with art by Luke Ross, who does fantastic Star Wars work. And the summary is Cassian Andor's final mission before he meets his ultimate heroic destiny. Before the heist that shook the galaxy, a lone rebel operative walks into danger. Cassian Andor infiltrates the lawless maze of Kafrene, racing against troopers, bounty hunters, and time itself in a tense espionage thriller. So they're cramming one more story in between the finale of season 2 of Andor and the beginning of Rogue One. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I am so on board with all of these, and I'm so looking forward to them. And of course, we got the amazing show Andor, but this is going to add just another layer of motivation and just a little bit more, as it says, this tense espionage thriller. So I'm excited to see it on the page. How about you?
Yeah, it sounds great. It just does kind of, it's the trend of Star Wars, like there's no moment that won't be written about at some point. So
True.
I mean, they filled up the era between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back in the current continuity with comics. There's barely a moment untouched for Luke, Leia, and Han, Chewbacca, and the droids in that period. And so now we're kind of getting into that with Andor and such. So I mean, fantastic. I'll be curious to see what they do. There's that old maxim, if you're going to tell a story, it better be worth telling. And did we need something between the end of Andor and the beginning of Rogue One? I feel that was the thing they kept telling us with this in season 2. It's like it's going to lead right in to Rogue One. Well, apparently not. There's something that comes between the two. So, okay, but look, I say some of that in jest. I'll be interested in checking it out at some point.
Oh, of course.
So this will be followed up by Jen Erso on June 3rd. This will be written by Ethan Sachs, who's done a lot of Star Wars comics and done plenty of good ones, with some art by Ramon Rosanas. And this one's called A Prisoner of the Empire, A Chance at Hope. And the description reads, on the toxic Wobani fields, Jen Erso's brutal routine shatters when an unlikely crew begs the infamous slicer, Liana Halleck, to help pull off an impossible escape. Can Jen outwit Imperial security droids, tower cannons, and incinerators long enough to crack the code and keep a frightened young prisoner alive? Will a leap of faith heal old scars from Galen, Lyra, and Saw, or will Labani claim Jin's future before the rebellion ever can? Well, I think we know the answers to some of those questions,
Sure.
but she's clearly not getting away herself. But if I
Mhm.
had to guess, whoever she's helping are going to be the ones that escape. So, what do you think about this idea?
Yeah, this one sounds really fun, and I feel like of all of them, we've gotten the least for Jin, and I know that we've had a couple of the, like, shorter books and that type of thing, but we really haven't had a lot of Jin-centric pre and or kinds of things, so I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah, I think part of the reason for that, and I don't know, she was what, 19, 21 at the time of Rogue One, fairly
Yeah,
young as a
mhm,
character. And so a lot of the time we have available for her backstories would have been her as a young child. And that Rebel Rising book that is it Beth Rivas wrote it?
yes, mhm,
Yeah.
yep,
That covered a fairly substantial part of her life and there.
mhm,
So yeah,
mhm.
this will be interesting to check out. I feel like it's a little predictable about where it's going to be end up. I hope I'm surprised based on the description, but we'll see. The third one of these is features Saw Gerrera, and it's written by Mark Bernardin and it has art by Gabriel Guzman. And the description is witness the act of revolution that was too much for the rebellion. I think there's been a lot of those from Saw, but anyway.
Yes.
After proving himself in the Clone Wars, Saw Gerrera was a soldier for the cause of freedom and was willing to do anything to secure it, including leading a mission deep into Imperial territory. At stake, a source of information that would provide a tactical advantage that could shift the balance of power in the rebels' favor, but as a price to be paid for that information too high. So, this is suggestive. What do you think?
Lies, deception. No, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Every day, more lies.
Every day. Of course, Saw is balancing on the precipice of a lot of moral ambiguity throughout the whole course of Rogue One and pre-Rogue One especially, and so hopefully, this will give us a little bit maybe even deeper character psychology for Saw, but I'm thinking it's just gonna be an all-out kind of, adventure for him and just showing again how unhinged he can be.
Yeah, I mean, Saw of many, I'd say probably of all the Rogue One characters is the one that's had the most development outside of
Mhm.
Rogue One between various novels, video games. We've seen him in Andor plenty, comics and the like. So this is interesting. The thing that stands out to me here is that, but is the price to be paid for that information too high? Is this where we finally see him suffer what injuries that he gets that results in his final appearance in Rogue One?
Oh, yeah. Good call.
Yeah, that's my guess.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, moving on to the fourth one, which is Chirrut Bays, coming out in August. They don't have a specific date yet. But this is written by Stephanie Phillips with art by Kieran McCown. And the description reads, a strike against the Empire, but at what cost? Baze Malbus and Chirrut Imwe attempt a covert mission to sabotage a kyber mine that has been overtaken by Imperial forces. But when something unexpected stands between them and their objective, the mission becomes far more complicated than they expected. To succeed, faith will be tested, and an impossible choice must be made. I'm really excited for this one. These are characters that I think deserve more development. We had the one Magna that I think we talked about on the podcast.
We did.
That's
Mhm.
yeah, in the past. But other than some cameo appearances here or there, there's not been a whole lot more material to develop these two.
Right, and it's always great to see the 2 of them in action and just the relationship that they have to the Force and to each other and to just their commitment to keeping the ideals of the Force and the Jedi as they are alive. So yeah,
hmm
for sure.
hmm The final one surprises me, and it's about Darth
Me
Vader
too. Yeah.
arriving in September. The description, it's written by Chris Condon with art by Luke Ross. The description is when negotiations fail, the Empire sends in its attack dog, Darth Vader. Director Orson Krennic's negotiations with the gem-rich planet of Hereld have hit a standstill. Its leader, Hark, refuses to allow the Empire to mine its rare kyber deposits for use in the Death Star's deadly super laser. But when the Emperor catches wind of Krennic's failure, he sends his most trusted acolyte, Darth Vader, to apply the kyber from Hark by any means necessary. That's hard to read. Okay.
It is.
you can never get too much Darth Vader. And the thing about Darth Vader, in my opinion, is that it's kind of best when we let the actions do the talking for him, where we don't necessarily dive too much into his psyche. And this sounds like the Darth Vader goes in and throws his weight around and gets the job done type of story. And I'm there for that. But what do you think?
Mhm. Well, I'm wondering if this is going to be, I don't want to say necessarily a red herring, but kind of along the same lines as the book that we just read, the Master of Evil book, where
Mhm.
it sounds like it's going to be Darth Vader focused, but yet it kind of is, but it's a little more Darth Vader adjacent. And just from the description talking about Krennic, his negotiations with the gem-rich planet. And so I'm wondering if it's going to be more Krennic oriented, but with a Vader tie-in. You know what I mean? Not that Vader's going to be
Sure.
necessarily a cameo appearance, obviously, but I mean, let's face it, like you said, anything with Darth Vader's name on it, it's going to bring fans in.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think the assurance I have on this is that it's a comic as opposed to a novel.
Mhm.
So when you have a novel, you have point of view characters, which is not to say you don't in comics, but you have to spend more time inside of their heads than you do with a comic.
Mhm.
So even if Krennic has a larger role in this than what we, maybe this description suggests, I think we're still going to get a healthy dose of Darth Vader in the process.
Mhm.
So I like I said, I understand what you're saying, but I don't know that it's quite the same thing
Mhm.
because, as I was saying earlier, you can't spend too much time in Darth Vader's head. That's kind of the point of that character, is that
Right.
you 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 learn more about him through everyone else's perception. So anyway,
Yeah, and let's face it, Darth Vader looks much better in the panels of a comic doing his thing than Krennic does.
oh yeah, absolutely. But Ben Mendelsohn was fantastic every time he's played Krennic, and it was a shame that they didn't use him more in the season
Oh,
2 of Andor.
agreed. Yes,
But
totally agree with that.
hey, if they want to give us more stories about the construction of the Death Star, I am there for it. So
Yes, please.
okay, well that's it. That is it for this week's news. A little bit about Maul, a little bit about Bo-Katan, some about Rogue One, and some comics. Nice diversity of stories there. But we'll go ahead and wrap things up for this week on Podcast Stardust. We hope you enjoyed the episode and our episodes from this week. And if you did, please consider subscribing to the podcast if you haven't done so already. We're available on all the podcatchers, and we'd love it if you could rate and review the show while you're doing that. And then if you want to catch even more of what we have to offer, one of the best places you can do that is at retrozap.com. The entire catalog of 1004 previous shows is available there. Jay, I want to go ahead and remind everybody about what our social media contacts are and where else we can be found online.
Yes, sir. So we are very conveniently found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And if this is your first episode of Podcast Stardust, hello there and welcome. We'd love it if you share out the show with your friends. And we also have tons of boards over on Pinterest that you can check out, all kinds of fun things for everything Star Wars. And if your other streaming platforms aren't enough, you can also check us out on YouTube and YouTube Music. So please like, subscribe, and share those out as well. And if you'd like to drop us a line, you can do so at podcaststardust@gmail.com. Always looking for listener questions and feedback. So please send those in, and we would love to read those on air. And then we also have our T Public store, and we have 7 different show logo designs available on all kinds of fun things, from t-shirts and sweatshirts to coffee mugs and even baseball hats. So once again, hit up that link in our show notes.
All right, what's up in the world of cosplay?
Well, you can always catch me over on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay, and gearing up to hopefully go to Fan Expo Cleveland here in a couple weeks. So I know I've been kind of like, yes, I'm going, no, I'm not. Yes, I'm going, no, I'm not. So I think I'm pretty much going to be there at this point. So that'll be in the middle of March, and you can check out all my posts over there. And while you're at it, if you're in the Cleveland area, you can hit up the link in my bio and get your own tickets to Fan Expo Cleveland as well.
Okay, upcoming on the show, we have our next entry in the Clone Wars rewatch on Monday. I believe that is episode 12, and it features Asajj Ventress, so it's going to be fun. And then on Wednesday, we are getting back into the Darth Bane Path of Destruction book club with a discussion of chapters 4 through 6. So get your book out, pull out that bookmark, and catch up before we do the episode, and that'll be coming up before you know it. So with that, thanks for listening to episode 1005 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great weekend, and until next time, may the Force be with you.